Good to go.
Fantastic. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest webinar from Nostra. Today, we're going to focus on meeting ICT regulatory requirements within the financial sector. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Gary Byrne, and I am the Managed Services Director here at Nostra. We always start by thanking everybody for joining us today, and we always say to attendees that we do have several other webinars, all focused on areas which can help you. In the past, we've done webinars on cybersecurity, on governance and compliance, on adopting frameworks such as NIST and DORA, which is also topical and which we'll also discuss in this webinar. We've webinars on upgrading from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and several other helpful topics. They're all available on Nostra's YouTube channel, and we will share links to that channel in a follow-up email after today's session. Okay, so we've seen a lot of change lately in the financial sector with increasing regulatory demands, the aforementioned DORA, as well as ongoing reviews and requirements around auditing and validation. So today we're going to look at the requirements and importantly, how you can meet them and how you can help operationalize them into your organization. That's a big side of it, is how can I get them into my organization? As always, these sessions are best when interactive, so please, any questions, please post them. There is a chat function and a Q&A function, so any questions you have, throw them in there and we will handle them for you. We have a panel of experts here to take your questions today. So we have our Head of Compliance, Jason Burns. We have our Head of Security, Darren Mooney, and we've one of the leading cyber ICT risk and compliance consultants, Reg Stallard, here as well. The team are all here to take any questions that you may have. And at the end of today's session, we will have the panel of experts there and dealing specifically with Q&A. We will, as always, be recording the sessions and we will send on the recordings and the slides to attendees afterwards. So again, thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to hand over to our Head of Compliance, Jason Burns, who's going to kick us off with today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Gary. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, or if you're watching back, we appreciate you putting in the time there to join us here. So as we were all working away through COVID a number of years ago, one of the questions I was being asked at the time was, where's my next spend coming from? Where's my next resource that I'm going to have to provide? How am I going to plan for that? And at the time, we were all talking about cybersecurity. Now we have, in addition to that, we're regulated. We now required to do certain items. So that's across large areas of the economy now at this stage, and especially in the financial sectors, courtesy of DORA coming in this year, and for other areas within the sector, like the credit unions in 2028. So what does that actually mean? So at a very simple level, it means that resourcing and planning will have to come in on your IT and your meeting those regulatory requirements. It's not something that someone can do as part of an ordinary job. You will need to have resources either dedicated or outsourced to help you in order to make sure you meet it. Because as Gary said, one of the keys that we'll be looking at later on is operationalizing it. And what we mean by that is it becomes part and parcel of how a business does business. That it is what we do, not something we catch up on at the end of the month or the end or anything like that. So what do they look like? Well, from the central bank, we have various cost guidances, for example, on outsourcing is one of the previous ones, and now we have DORA coming in, which is raising the standards around risk management and accountability across the business. So today's webinar, what we're going to look at is what we have either seen working out there ourselves or what we have put in place ourselves that really allows companies to build towards what they have to achieve in order to meet those regulations. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to look at technologies that are put in place, strategies that you use, and how they can be integrated into what you have already. And in looking at it, like at a lot of these things, it can be a bit of a monument when you look at it first to say, how am I going to get there? So what we look to do is we look to do it on a phased approach. And perhaps then as you reach certain phases, you do then different threads within that phase, all geared towards getting you to where you want to be. So We'll move swiftly through the regulations because look, most of us know them, but let's call them out. So we have from the central bank, we have the ongoing guidance requiring policies, resilience plans, operational, have oversight in place. We have DORA after coming in with the unified risk standards, incident reporting, resilience testing, third-party oversight, and the requirements for communication and peer groups as well. And then what must actually happen? We must comply with those. It's a very simple thing, but it's like DORA, it's like GDPR, and it's like health and safety. I view a lot of these as like health and safety for the IT systems. Everyone is happy that things are going fine until they're not. So we want to make sure we have the best in place for that day when things aren't going well. So that's what we need to look forward to. So what are the key compliance areas under DORA? So DORA has the DORA pillars. So what are they? They're the risk management framework. So what does that entail? That entails putting in place formal policies, governance within the organization, with the board, with committees, risks, etc., so that we assess them. We decide, are we happy with that level of risk? Do we need to mitigate it? Can we mitigate it? Must we just accept it? And the board has oversight of that in some shape or form. When there's an issue, how do we actually notify the authorities about it, and perhaps our peer groups? One of the examples I was given at one discussion group with insurance was someone who worked on financial services desk in a share trading platform. And when one of the platforms had an issue, or one of the desks from one of the large companies, I won't name names, looked like they were under attack, they notified all the other companies within the exchange to say, we're under attack, it might be coming to yourselves as well. So useful, because then people were looking out for the odd thing that might be going on in their network. Operational resilience testing, look, it's in the name of the regulation, digital operation resilience. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at business continuity, disaster recovery. We're looking at ongoing mitigations to make sure we're resilient. Do we have, at a simple level, do we have more than one internet connectivity out of our main area? Do we have elements duplicated in our data centers? We go on to checking, are we managing our vulnerabilities correctly? Are we doing our penetration tests appropriately? If we're in a certain segment, or our services are a certain segment, are we doing the threat-led penetration testing? And how often are we doing our business continuity testing with our critical services? Our third-party risk management, a big body of work in this. We end up with our outsourcing risk register, we end up with our board, where we end up with notifying the CBI, etc., of what we have and where we have it, and how we actually manage that, and what level of due diligence do we put in place on that. And then finally, we have our information sharing. Are we engaging in trusted networks so that we can share our threat intelligence with each other, and are we participating fully in that, so that across the sector as a whole, that we actually meet the requirements under DORA and help protect the economy as a whole as part of that.
Jason, thank you. I might just jump in there on that, actually. So you had the pillars of DORA there. Can I ask, what are the most common gaps that we see, or that you see, when assessing an institution or an organization for DORA readiness? For any company, when a compliance requirement becomes applicable, what are the biggest gaps? What are the usual suspects that you find?
I think the biggest usual suspects, going back to something I mentioned earlier, is the planning and resources. It's something that we've seen on some guidance from the CBI as well, which confirms it, which is that you must resource your organization appropriate to the level of risk in your organization, and the level of assets in your organization. So when you step into this, if you expect somebody who's already got a full day job to be able to manage this, you need to really make sure that you either assist them or you put in additional resources around them such that they can manage it. Now, then when you step into the regulations or otherwise with it, one thing I would say is the disaster recovery testing and the actual testing of whether you can get your systems back online in the time you expect it to do. So with a lot of companies, what they do is they look at their backups and they say, okay, well, I need that file back within X period of time or otherwise. Now, when you have a wider outage, will you be able to meet those? So that's one of the big gaps that comes up, that actually we'd be able to do it for a small subset of what we have, but maybe not for everything. And then the other primary one I would see is the whole idea around a security baseline and how to manage that. And what I mean about that is a security baseline is, at a simple level, how hardened is your system? Have we locked it down? Have we made sure it stays locked down? And how do we monitor the system to see if there's anything untoward going in there? Because a lot of us grew up in the day of, you have an antivirus on your computer, and that protected us. Now we know, with the nature of AI and all those modern threats, how is it that we can see that something unusual is happening on our network, and maybe it has affected our existing baseline? So Gary, those are the kind of the three areas that I would see when I'm talking.
Yeah, I think you're right there. One of the things traditionally I've seen over the years with BCP or business continuity plans is testing the process. You know what I mean? So we know we might bring an application or a server or a cloud server back online within a certain time frame, but it's making sure the process around that is in place. You know, escalation and people who needs to be involved, as you say, that they can help with that. And then the other key thing is building out the kind of incident response plans, because there's so many more things these days that can drive or become an incident, that we need to really think about every single one of them and make sure that they're all captured and we're ready for no matter what comes our way.
Correct. When an incident occurs, look, we're in the scenario where we're used to it, but it's part of our business. We provide that we respond when a customer has an issue, and with a lot of us, this goes back many years now. So we know the importance of having those structures in place of when something happens. So it is certainly one of the key things to make sure when you're doing the testing, that is it practical what you're doing and how you're responding to it.
Thanks, Jason.
So onto the fundamentals in preparing for DORA. So as we look at this, what is it when you step inside the front door of your organization and you're looking to see what do we need to get to relative to DORA? So we have our IT security and cyber risk management. So a lot of us will look at our systems and will say, yeah, we've that done, and we'd like to do that next year, and we might do that the following year because we know it's a good thing to do. It's a best practice, whatever that is. Maybe it's SIEM or SOC. Maybe it's, we know people have the administrator access, but we want to get rid of it. I equate that to, we know we should be doing something better, so let's bring it forward. Let's do it better, because the worst time to realize we haven't done it is when there was an incident. So we want
Jason,
to look.
Jason, I might just add something there on the policy side. Just obviously, I would have worked with lots of different clients, with the enterprise level clients, and seen lots of audits, and particularly some coming back from the central bank. There is weaknesses around IT policies and our practices and asset registers and that. And this is probably just as relevant to the credit union space. There's particular guidance from the central bank for credit unions in terms of the policies they should have and what those policies should contain, and there is weaknesses and gaps in there. There's quite specific requirements. There's 4 in particular that the credit union handbook defines, and there is gaps within some credit unions policies that they're not covering off in black and white. Some basic things that should be in there, and for me, an asset register is key, and sometimes we're reliant on third parties to provide those asset registers, and really they should be owned by the credit union. And there's particular requirements for those asset registers in terms of their criticality to the business and their dependency to operate critical services. So this is what we'd be looking to get in place and effective from the start, because this is a top down. You know, this is what we would look for the board to approve, and this is what we would ask the board to, this is what we report back to the board and ask the board to govern and make sure that assurance is in there. So that really is a key one in terms of security and information security. an organization should have an information security policy that defines what controls or practices they have in place. And again, those practices and controls should be reported back to the board. I see that as a key one and kind of like a starting point for lots of organizations, not just credit unions, but particularly in the financial space, in the financial sector. When we're looking back at these policies, we sometimes we state certain things that we do, but we don't evidence it, or we don't do it. So when any auditor is coming in, be it from the central bank or another regulator, they're looking for evidence to say that you're doing what you're doing. And if you're not doing what you're stating you're doing, it just appears as a weakness in governance or an assurance. And I think that's key findings lately from any of the regulators.
Yeah, Reg, I agree. When I sit down with companies, I often have 3 steps to governance, or what the system will look like as it's working. So the first one is policies. The next one is a procedure, how you do what's required in your policy. The next item is the action, so are you actually doing it? And then the final element is the record. So have you a record that you have been doing what you say you're supposed to be doing, so you can prove it, so you have your audits, your internal audits, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much for that, Reg.
And just to jump in very quickly on that, I think when I speak with a lot of organizations, they're looking, some of them, of course, DORA is applicable now. Then we work with credit unions, and DORA is applicable, from 2028. There are other, there's ongoing reviews in the sector, and there's lots going on. And I think, Reg, you're bang on, and Jason there, the fundamental, like the very start to it all, is having a look at the policies there. And, anybody who's online today, reach out to Nostra. We've got a full team here. If you have any questions or queries over your policies, you'd like us to review them on your behalf or whatever it is, we're very, very happy to engage. So I just want to throw that in, guys. Thanks very much.
Sure, and it follows one of the guidance I saw from one of the European supervisory authorities when DORA came in. They said, if you haven't even started, first things first, get your asset list, know what you have, define what's your most critical, look at the risks associated with them, and put in place a plan around those risks that are in there. So if you haven't done anything yet, that's a very good place to start, which is to look at your assets and your critical services and functions, and decide, okay, well, look, I know I need to do this huge body of work, but can I actually make a start here with my risk management by taking something where I know there's a fundamental risk and start mitigating it and recording it. Next fundamental is continuity management, which I mentioned previously, which is looking at what happens in the event that something goes wrong. How do we react to it? How do we then recover? And then how do we learn from it? So looking to put in a framework around that. Around IT governance and risk management, Reg, you alluded to it there as well. So we need to put in governance within the organization and bring the risk up at the board level, so that the board is aware of it. Not only is the board aware of it, within DORA, the board must be suitably informed, trained, etc. around it to make informed decisions around risk management. So it is a critical element of it. So that means beginning training sessions with boards or similar, or putting in place an education process around the critical people in the organization, putting in place committees, maybe something similar. And then the final element around certain fundamentals around DORA itself is the concept of, okay, we've done an audit by somebody. Now do we have an external party that will come and review what that party actually did? So who checks the checker? Who's the police that polices the internal police, or the third party that comes in? So do we have an independent expert view on what we've been doing? So moving on now. So the resilience planning element itself. So briefly touched on that. Identify your critical services. So what we're doing here now is we're looking at what are the elements of our system and what we need to do around them. And later on, I'll come to a strategy of how we know all these elements that we're going to have to look at. How am I going to work on these as a logical sequence to achieve our goal at the end? So we looked at our critical services. We're going to define the tolerances around those. What is acceptable? How long are they down for? How much data may I be missing? Or what does it look like in terms of when I restore, how am I able to access it? Do I only have one person accessing it in a disaster recovery? Is that enough for what I'm doing here? The plan itself, as Gary alluded to, we need to have perhaps certain playbooks in place to respond to different situations that might lead to the same requirement. We might need to restore our data, but if the event is a certain type, would we respond differently to that event? And we're looking at that then, and we start doing our testing around that, and we test those scenarios, and we work through our documentation. We identify where we have issues, perhaps with the checklists or the instructions, or maybe the records that are keeping, and whether they were kept up to date correctly. And also then, once we've done all that, we say to ourselves, okay, well, are we still considering the threat environment? Darren, now you're there front and center in our security. That the people that are in the security team are no doubt seeing upcoming threats the whole time. I mean, Jaguar Land Rover had something recently. I saw something today that a number of fashion houses are being hit at the moment. So, from yourself, when you look at the changed threat landscape over the last year, what are you seeing are the big changes that are out there that maybe people need to be aware of?
Thanks for bringing me in, Jason. Yeah, so the advent of AI obviously is one thing that's causing, given the bad actors, an opportunity to become a lot more proficient in the way they create attacks. So their ability now to hack into a network has completely changed. So we're seeing an increased amount of ransomware attacks. Obviously, we had one recently, which is a great concern for everybody. But I think going back based on what you're talking and aligned to the framework, the ability to recover is everything. So having that plan in place, having your business continuity plan, your disaster recovery plan in place, understanding who's involved in that, and it's probably a matter of when it comes to getting an attack, but it's our ability to recover is really the important bit. So this is actually a really good framework which aligns and puts people in a really, really good place.
Very good. Yeah, you make a very good point there in terms of it used to be a case of if we get hit. I think it's fair to say with the advent of AI and so on, it's now a case of when we are being hit. A lot of us may not realize this, but we'll say our 365 environments or similar would be getting hit day in, day out, and the security services are in place to look at them. So it's not so much a case that something might change tomorrow. It just might be, there might be a subtle difference in the attack. So we need to be prepared at all times. Going back to one of those core tenets of DORA, it is the board level oversight and the alignment with the business strategy. So when we are looking at our systems, are our systems IT strategy matched to our business strategy? Is it supporting it appropriately? Is the board suitably informed of it? Is the board making the appropriate decisions that are required here? So
Jason, just on that, when you mentioned the board there, because it's relevant to what we're discussing earlier, I think from what I see, and again, it's not just in the credit union space, across a lot of the finance sector clients that we work with, the board aren't getting the relevant reports or the relevant metrics back. So I think one of the key things, particularly with DORA and some of the guides from the central bank, is define the right KPIs and the KRIs for the board to review and to actually keep them involved and let them have that IT risk oversight. A lot of the time, boards are provided with service reports or quality of day-to-day activities where it's really the risk to the business, like the percentage of backups completed, the percentage of business continuity testing completed on time, vulnerability scanning completed and remediated within a defined period. They're the type of things that boards should be seeing and giving input into how the business operates. So that's key. And then that comes down to the policy and governance side as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Reg. And around the auditing aspect of that and reporting, clarity in the reporting and understand the responsibility. So it's really important that if you have some gaps and that these are being presented back and they're front and center of your conversations.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. So the next item, not everyone may have heard of this concept, so I'll bring it here in first. So we'll refer to it a couple of times during it. It's called the 3 lines of defense model, which is that the risks are managed on a day-to-day basis. That's the first level of defense. The next level of defense is that there's oversight on it in order to check to see, are we doing what we say we're doing? Are we managing the risks? As you were saying, have we got regular reports, etc., etc. And then the final level of the defense is there an audit being done, and is there independent assurance done on that audit? So, was it a friendly auditor, and maybe perhaps, and we should have been a little bit more hard on ourselves. That brings in the expert around it. Maybe it was an audit that was unreasonable, and we need to put proportionality around it, because we can't lose sight of the fact that one of the elements of DORA is the protections need to be proportional. So not everybody is a 7 billion asset company. Perhaps you're in under DORA or under some financial regulations, and you just need the level of protection or defense that's appropriate to yourselves. So once again, with the board level, the compliance, looking at the outsourcing and the third party and DORA, and then finally, as Reg has said, the boards should maintain the critical policies within the organisation, review the risk registers, challenge the operational element of it, in order to make sure that there's appropriate, transparent reporting from the organisation to the board, in order to make sure we have very good governance around it. So well, here's a very simple deadline. Well, DORA is already in place. So we've worked with a number of organizations who are already within the DORA regulation, and we've worked with them on the outsourcing regulations, the governance, the upgrading of the policy, the upgrading of the third-party outsourcing and due diligence around them, and the contractual obligations around those. And of course, the credit unions have the extension until January 2028. However, the central bank is certainly encouraging that the credit union movement is aligned fully with DORA. There's relatively little difference between the requirements in DORA and the existing CBI guidance. So it's very much a case of, if you're in the financial sector now at this stage, that you really have to work towards that if you're not already there. So let's move on. There we go. So what are some practical steps for the regulatory readiness? Well, the outsourcing register. So this is coming front and center in a lot of due diligence coming into organizations at the moment. So have we looked at our third-party IT services? Have we checked all the dependencies along the line around our critical services? Do we have appropriate contractual obligations in place, and how often are we managing them? Have we worked on, having done our business impact analysis, do we now have our acceptable downtimes? Have we done our independent annual penetration tests? And if not, let's schedule them in and let's complete our testing. And now that we're going into our regulations, have we updated our policies and oversight to actually manage them? So here what we're going to look at now is
Jason, sorry, excuse me, I might just ask you there, practical steps, what approaches have you seen working, when implementing an IT management system to help accommodate those?
Okay, so the practical steps are, there's a number of different elements to that, and it can be down to the resources that you have. So if you're a one person sitting in an office in a small organization that's in front of you, it's quite a tome. So I think what you would look for is you would look for those quick wins to a degree, where perhaps we're already doing well and we can get there quite quickly. And then you look also at what's my highest risk, and you say, well, I'm going to look at those, and then you put in place a plan around it. As I was saying earlier, one of the earliest guidance after DORA came out was, what the supervisory authorities would like to know is, have you a plan in place to deal with it? So sit down and look at where you feel, I already know I have a problem. Let me put a plan in place around that, and then let me move on around that. Now, what you then look at as you go through the larger organizations is you do need to put in place some relevant frameworks around what you're doing and decide how are we going to measure ourselves. Now, is it
Yeah.
you talk to someone like ourselves and we bring in our gap analysis specifically around DORA? Is it that we take a more simplistic view because we're a smaller organization? Or do we go to the full nth degree where we call out the particular elements of the articles and we say, okay, are we 100% sure we've hit this? So really it's a case of it's planning, it's resources, and then it's looking to hit the critical elements for your business first, and then move forward from there.
Yeah, and I think it's quite healthy. What I've seen good activity on lately, including with ourselves, is managing third parties, managing the supply chain, because that's a big chunk of it as well, you know. So starting on that early is key. And you know, Reg always says, and he's right, you know, the asset policy, the asset register, knowing what we have in the first place is absolutely key. So they're probably two of what, you know, the biggest things that you can be starting on right now, I suppose. Whether it's the review or whether it is DORA or whatever your requirement is, those are the things to be looked at.
Yes, indeed. So look, what I'll discuss here is actually a phased approach around it. And so what does that look like as a best practice, we'll say, and how you look to integrate this into your organization. So looking at it here, so first of all, you have the discovery and gap analysis phase. So like I said there, you could, you know, if you're a small organization, you could take, okay, I know there are certain things I need to deal with quickly from the 5 pillars of DORA, and let me put a structure around that. At the other end of the scale, let's put in a full gap analysis across all the areas, because we're a larger organization, and then we can assign those responsibilities to elements of the organization. So one of our gap analysis covers up to 240 different criteria. I have seen another one that was more than 400 elements of it. So some of them are more granular, less granular as to where you go into it. Some of them are a happy medium. Some of them, by the time you finish reading at them at the end of the week, I don't think you call yourself happy, but let's just say you have to do it. It's like taking the medicine at the end of it. So when you're looking at the gap analysis, you'll be looking at your policies, you'll be looking at the technical controls, you'll be looking at the incident response, you'll be looking at the third-party risks, because you're getting what are the fundamentals for our system. And then what you'll do is you'll say, okay, well, where am I good and bad in each of those? And you'll say, okay, well, I'm relatively good on this one, but I'm really quite poor on that one. So what that will give you is that'll give you your action plan out of it. So what you get out of the end of this phase is you get your plan where you can say, okay, well, here are all the elements where I have a weakness. And now which ones of those are the highest risks to the company, or perhaps a fundamental element that will allow me to address a risk further on. So it's really to give you a prioritized action plan at the end of it, so that we can sit down and say, okay, we've had our gap analysis now. However, we've managed that gap analysis, and we're now going to work on it under these timeframes. And we're going to look at the following technical solutions to them, if we need a technical solution, or perhaps a governance solution. So giving you a simple gap analysis. So for example, if you're at a very early stage, you might be looking at a relatively simple element of in your gap analysis, certain areas. So here's one area. So we're talking about outsourced IT and third parties. So, you know, very simple level. Do we maintain a register of our outsourced IT services? Yes, no. What's it looking like? What do I need to do? What score would I give myself? Our third-party contracts reviewed for continuity and security. In other words, as an element of that, have we included the third party in our disaster recovery planning? And also, do we require them to be able to recover in an appropriate period of time? When we're looking at new vendors, is anyone doing a risk assessment around it? And it may not just be, will this vendor be in operation in the next year? It can also be a case of where are they keeping their data? You know, did we check, is the data in the EEA? Or do we need to look at perhaps making sure we have the standard contractual clauses in place in the event that they might not be in the EEA? And then final element, then are we getting assurance reports from our critical third parties? So for argument's sake, your banking system might be hosted in another organization. So what reports do you get from that service which says what the vulnerability assessments are, how often is it updated, what are the risks associated with it that have now changed or otherwise? In other words, what are the fundamentals so that you can have assurance that that service will be available to you after the event? Or within an organization like ourselves, what is the assurance for ourselves? We have our ISO 27001 certification independently audited every 6 months at the moment. So how do you measure that within an organization? The next page then, this takes it to a different level. And apologies, perhaps the quality of it isn't the greatest, but it seems to have lost something in there on my screen. But you can see it's referring to the various chapters and articles of DORA itself. And it asks us, what do we have in place? So financial entities shall have in place an internal governance and control framework that ensures an effective and prudent management of ICT risk in accordance with Article 6.4 in order to achieve a high level of digital operational resilience. Now, why might you go to that level of detail? Because of where you are in the sector, perhaps, rather than a small asset base, perhaps you have a very large asset base. So when you get to that level, the proportionality will kick in, and you'll be required to be much more precise and granular in how you're presenting these. So moving on to phase 2, well, here we are with governance and technical implementation. So we've looked at our gap analysis, we come up with our plan, and we say, okay, well, what are we missing around here? What are we missing in the governance framework? Well, okay, we'll implement that at the board level or similar. What are the technical controls deployment? So we're now putting in the controls around. So do we need to plan and budget for putting in elements of it? What implication will there be in putting it? So we're coming back to our IT strategy. So yeah, so
I might just add something to that. I suppose anyone who know me know I'm a big fan of a structured way of managing IT security and controls. Now, I would suggest organisation utilise a governance framework here, the likes of this CSF 2.0 or ISO 27000. Now, some of our clients have that. This gives a structure to an organisation as to what to align to or what policies, processes, controls to put in place. They don't necessarily have to get certification like ourselves, but it gives them a good base, and it's not something like this is what NOSRA recommend. So these are globally recognized frameworks and standards that are effective in managing operational IT risk and security controls. Even look at the ISO 27000 mandatory document set. For most organizations, I would say look at that and give us a good reason why you should not be doing these things. That they're not cumbersome. They're fit for organizations of all sizes, from small SMEs to global Fortune 500 companies. So I would suggest utilising some of those frameworks, at least reviewing them and seeing some of the structure they offer. DORA is really linked to this CSF 2.0. Like if you map some of the controls to that, you should be compliant, and you'll have a really strong framework in place.
Correct. That's right, Reg. A large project I was working on last year, it wasn't DORA, it was around the NIS directive, which is for operators of essential services in the economy. So the element of that was used for the gap analysis was based on the NIST framework, which has identify, protect, respond, recover. Yeah. And the new one adds govern into it. So you can see if you align to one of those frameworks like Reg and myself and the rest of the team do, you've covered an awful lot of the elements of it. And what you then bring into it are any additional requirements around DORA. So you don't need to go out and get a DORA gap analysis. You can go out and you can use the NIST 2 framework, which has governance around it, and then add in the elements.
So that's why I suggested it, Jason, because the latest iterations of those frameworks have a governance function within them, and that's probably been missing in most organizations over the last 4 to 5 years. But it's key now. It's key for any regulation. There's that governance layer, so that's included in the updated NIST 2 framework, and it's always been in 27,001. So we've done a webinar on that as well. So if you're interested, have a look back on that series.
Thanks very much for that, Reg. So the rest of phase 2 then, what we're looking at here is monitoring and response and recovery based on the risk profiles. We're looking at proportional and scalable measures as we're looking to implement it. So you've got to make sure that you're not overburdening the smaller entity while at the same time being appropriate for it. So going back to what I was saying earlier about the size of your organization, or perhaps the risk in your organization, it might turn out to be an organization with relatively few members of staff, but in actual fact, the assets might be quite large. So you may have to be appropriate there. And then finally, your integrated resilience and compliance. So you want to integrate the governance and technical measures into your organization so that you can build out from there. So what I mean by that is you start off with your governance committee or similar, you have your risks identified, they are involved, or the board are involved with the planning, and they agree or give direction around it, and then you move forward as an organization once you've got that governance and technical implementation in place. So we've now done our governance and technical implementation. We've maybe brought in various security measures. We brought in SIEM or SOC. We've maybe implemented a new password management system, maybe a PIM or a PAM, personal privileged identity management or privileged access management, depending on the organization. So we've perhaps updated our backup and resilience. We put in an immutable backup solution such that if ransomware gets in, we don't get it. Now, how do we ensure that these are all working appropriately? So this is what we call operationalizing the requirements. So what we need to look here is we need to make sure that they're integrated into the daily workflows in the business, or the weekly workflows in the business. Is there what we call a compliance calendar or a compliance schedule in place, such that it's managed and we know that these elements are being checked? We can verify that actually, yes, our SIEM and our SOC is giving us all these updates, so we know it's doing its work. We can see that our backups, and we've done these automated tests, they've worked. But when do we call out that we review the risk register? Who's looking at the risk register? Who's managing it? And so on and so forth. With the penetration tests, are they happening at the interval that's either A, required by the regulations, or B, that we consider we should do them more than the regulation requires? So an awful lot of the regulations are minimum requirements. There's no reason that you can't be doing more than that if you deem it appropriate. We look at
Jason, forgive me, just coming in there on that. Gary mentioned earlier about practical approach, because this can be overwhelming. There's a lot of information here to take in. But an IT risk register, having a register of the critical items or vulnerabilities that you're tracking and mapping, and no doubt there's everyone here on this call has something to that effect. But sometimes we find that the focus area isn't on those top 10 or those top 5 vulnerabilities. So again, giving you the opportunity to focus in what is the key risk to your business, how are you tracking that, and giving you some focus areas. So just while you were walking through that, just the thought came to mind, something for the audience to think about.
Thank you very much for that, Darren. So yes, the monitoring of your ongoing risks, really, really critical, because using a very simple analogy, 25 years ago, all your antivirus updates came on a single floppy disk. Now it's a whole different ballgame. The threat has evolved incredibly. A policy I wrote 15 years ago might be now only 60% valid, because the risks have changed around it. So because you did policies last year does not mean that you're guaranteed they're fit for purpose this year. Might only be a small change needed, but by the same token, the advent of AI has really changed the threat environment for us all now. So things are accelerating much quicker. So the rest of the operationalizing element of it, our third party and our information sharing, are we participating in those monthly meetings? Are we reviewing the peer groups? Are we getting in information, and are we reviewing that information? Have we subscribed to various services and so on? And ultimately, what makes it operationalized? So going back to what I discussed on an earlier slide, policies and procedures give you your actions, and you must record the outcomes. And then you measure those outcomes at the end of it, or you put governance around them with the board. So we've put in our policies that define what we should be doing. Our procedures tell us how we should be doing it. Our actions are the results of those. And our records allow us to show that we have been doing this. For example, very simple one. What was the change control meeting last month? Did we actually do it? Have people been putting in place changes without going through change control? Continuous improvement then. So now you're in the final phase. So I often say when you're putting in systems, it's very much a case of, look, you put it in day one and that's brilliant. And then you look at it the following day and what was I thinking? And then the final element when you get to maturity is where you're now just keeping it nicely above water, so to speak, or keeping it at best practice. You've now brought everything up. So what does that look like? Well, you look at continuous improvement, and you make sure that as an element of that, you look to see have there been changes to the frameworks or otherwise. You look at your ongoing risk assessments, really front and center, as Darren was talking about in the previous slide. Have we discussed with external parties? Have we brought in someone to review what we're doing? The board level oversight, is the board engaged with what we're doing here? Have we informed them appropriately? Are they giving direction as appropriate? And then the engagement with the industry forums in order to keep us at a really good level. So those are the four phases as I would see it. Going back to them, the first element is your gap analysis and your discovery. You then look at your governance and your technical implementations. You're putting in the results of your plan that you got out of the first phase. You're now making sure that you're doing it all correctly and you're doing it regularly with the operationalizing of it. And then finally, that's all now running like a well-oiled machine. How can we improve that year on year? So after we look at that and we look at how can we help you around that? So what kind of implementation solutions do we have in place to support the sector? So we can do tailored compliance services around gap analysis, policy, procedure updates. We can provide the ongoing oversight. We can provide the ongoing engineering time to assist you with that. And we can also provide the independent oversight of perhaps another company that's doing the work in your organization, and we come in and critique or otherwise that, or ensure that there's the quality of it. The next element of it as part of that is using the 3 lines of defense model, the placement of engineers to assist you in the day-to-day management of it, the virtual chief compliance officers for oversight and guidance. Perhaps it's monthly, perhaps it's quarterly, biannually or otherwise. And then the audit support around the internal process, help you draw up your internal audit, help you manage it, and then come in afterwards to ensure that it's working appropriately. Key feature of it, it's digital resilience and cybersecurity. So you were talking about putting in place conditional access systems around it. Our Cloud Shield offering will help greatly around elements of that. Our penetration testing services, our vulnerability scanning services that we can do ongoing as well as bespoke, coming in with a network security audit, are around the gap analysis phase, where we come in and we do a deep dive of your network, and we bring out the elements that we feel that would really improve your security posture. Nobody has moral high ground that my IT system is perfect. I will often recommend to my customers, where I've been looking after their IT systems for years, that you need to get someone other than me, whoever me is, to look at it, to give that independent viewpoint, because we've all been too close to the trees at times to see the wood. SIEM and SOC services to give you that ongoing baseline monitoring to make sure nothing is starting to happen that maybe we should be aware of. Our resilience offerings that we can give you focus around redundant infrastructure, perhaps on the networking, perhaps on the physical infrastructure in the business. Our disaster recovery will include immutable backups and systems where, in the event that your normal day-to-day operation hosts or systems are unavailable, that we can make them available to you in a sandbox, essentially running as if they're running in your own organization. We can look at the infrastructure upgrades for you to bring you up to those levels around ISP connectivity and also the hardware, and also the change around secure remote access in recent times. Darren, perhaps you can comment on this, that there's been a change around the remote access technologies that our friends in the nefarious world and the dark web are currently hitting.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. So we're moving to a zero trust model. So the SSL VPN is still widely used in the across the sector. But what we've observed, and we've communicated this to our clients, is that the amount of attacks on this particular technology is increasing by the day. So moving to a zero trust model is through, there's many varieties in that, through cloud secure edge and global secure access, and you'll hear lots of acronyms around it, but ultimately it's creating a zero trust network. And forgive me, I have some background noise there in the office. So it created using and it's really there's a building site happening beside me. Forgive me. Who's come back to me?
Well, look, we'll come back to Darren maybe in a little bit. We're finishing up now shortly, but final element there: training and external validation. So one of the key pieces under our good old friend GDPR, it's there as a regulation, is ongoing commitment to cybersecurity training, and it's such a simple win as well relative to your cyber insurance requirements as well. And we can also provide on the external audits our third-party assurance. The final element then would be, so that was the implementation, how we can help you to implement elements on it. What would our ongoing solutions look like? Well, our tiered compliance services. So we look at in compliance, some companies only need a touch once a year to check that their policies are up to date and so on and so forth. So we call that essentials. Then we move into the advisory phase, where we might be assisting them to manage their systems. We might put in our compliance officer in place there, come in with quarterly reports around how the risks, etc., are running. And then we also would look at embedded partners, where we would be essentially the people who run everything for them, as opposed to just providing assistance with them. And that would bring us onto our monitoring and oversight, which is what we can do, is we can do standalone oversight for specific events, or perhaps ongoing monitoring the services to make sure that the monthly reports, perhaps from your own ISP or MSP even, look like you're progressing forward around it. Our resilience testing, what we can do is, as part of our service, we can schedule the resilience testing with you, bring in different levels of it if you need the red, green, etc. in on it, or maybe you just require a simple firewall test once a year. And then, of course, our security and incident response from Darren and his team around the SIEM and SOC, the ongoing solution to make sure that we see anything happening that shouldn't be happening. Similarly, our remote monitoring and management tools on the physical elements of it help us to mitigate the threats and protect yourselves, and our ongoing vulnerability planning. So that's the end, I believe, for myself here today. So I'd like to thank you all very much, and I'm grateful for the input from the panel as we were going through. Is there any other questions from any of the attendees?
Jason, thanks again. Just to remind people, any questions you have, there's a chat function and a Q&A function there. Just throw them there, and we'll deal with them. Jason, thanks so much for that, and Darren and Reg. To people online, so regardless of whether it's a it's a review that you need to attend to, or whether it's preparation for DORA. I think the point was made that they're all kind of intertwined. You know what I mean? There's similarities between the whole lot of them. So from an Nostra point of view, what we would say, you know, there's a lot going on, but we absolutely have a lot of skill sets and, you know, people within the company to be able to help with it. So anybody online, reach out to your Nostra account manager for any further information or anything that we talked about on the webinar today. Anybody in the webinar who might not have a Nostra account manager, my contact details are gary.byrne@nostra.ie, and I'll personally make sure that you get looked after. So I would just like to again thank Head of Compliance Jason Burns, Head of Security Darren Mooney, and ICT Security and Compliance Consultant Reg Stallard for being on the webinar today. Thanks so much, folks. I think we'll leave it there, and as we said at the top of the session, we will forward on the link after today's session, and you will get the slides, and you will also get the link to Nostra's YouTube channel, where all previous webinars will be there as well. So thanks one and all.
Thank you all very much. Bye bye now.